Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ames. I'm a musician, producer, and music production teacher. Today we're going to be talking about buses and sends, what that means, what those are, how we use them, why we use them. So buckle up. We're getting on the bus. We're sending you to knowledge land. Okay, so right off the bat, learning how to properly use buses and sends are going to reform your workflow. They're going to make you more efficient. They're going to make you more organized. It'll also help your computer out a lot. Even if you have a nice, new, shiny computer that has a fast CPU, buses and sends will make your computer work better. For a long time, this whole technique was a mystery to me. I knew nothing about it. I knew what the words were. I'd heard the terms used before, but I didn't really know what it was, and I kind of just ignored it because it seemed like a lot to comprehend and I wasn't ready for it. But I'm going to try to make it real simple for you guys, teach you everything you need to know so your workflow can improve. So the first thing you need to know is buses and sends are basically the same function, but they have two different names because you use them in two different ways, even though the process, like I said, is basically the same thing. And that process is you're taking audio from your sound source, from a track, and you're pushing it to an auxiliary track. An auxiliary track is something that exists in every DAW, and it doesn't contain audio clips on the track. It's just a track that merely functions in order to process audio, to receive it, and put it somewhere else. The core difference is that buses are used to group tracks together, and sends are used to apply effects to a track or a group of tracks. It's a little confusing, so let's just get right into it. Let's start out with buses. If you want to manipulate a group of tracks uniformly across the board, use buses. In our example today, I have a bunch of acoustic guitar tracks that I want to group together because I want them to all have the same tone, the same reverb, the same EQ, the same everything. So we're going to use a bus. Let's go look at my mix and see what I'm talking about. Okay, so right now in this session, I have 4 acoustic guitar tracks. There were 2 guitar tracks that were tracked with 2 microphones each. So we have 2 to the left here and 2 to the right. So they're only 2 different takes, but there are 4 tracks together, and there are no effects on them, no nothing. They're just panned, and they're getting sent right to my normal stereo out. Now, like I said, you can do this in any DAW. I work in Logic, but the function is essentially the same. I think you can do it in basically every DAW except for GarageBand. I'm not sure why. GarageBand has a lot of function, but still they don't let you do this, which is strange. Okay, so let's group these together and bus them to an aux track. So the first thing you're going to do is change the output of all the tracks you want to send to this bus. In this case, I'm going to highlight all 4 of my guitar tracks. I'm going to go up to the output. I'm going to change it from stereo output to, let's say, I already have some buses in here, just ignore them. Let's say bus 6. You can choose any one that's empty. So now you can see the output of all 4 of these tracks changed to bus 6, and it created an aux track with the input set to bus 6. So this means when the input is set to bus 6 on the aux track, that means it's going to receive audio signal from anything whose output is bus 6. In this case, the 4 tracks that we just changed. So now if we play this back, you can see how the signal of all of these is now going to this aux1 track, which I'm going to rename acoustic guitar. So now if you want to, you can just solo this aux track and it'll have the same effect. Okay, so what is the point of all of this? First things first, let's talk about effects. If we want to put EQ on all of these acoustic guitar tracks, instead of opening up whatever EQ you use, we can just use the Logic stock one for now. Instead of applying this to one track and then copying it and pasting it to all 4 tracks, right? Now you have 4 instances of your EQ running, which if you're using a high-powered plugin, if you're using the Fab filter or something, this is going to take a lot of processing. Sure, it works. It sounds better. This is less low-end, more high-end, but instead of doing all that, you can take all these off and you can just apply it right to the bus. So now all 4 of these guitar tracks are getting sent to bus 6 and they're running through the channel EQ. Which means you're getting the same effect of the EQ on all your guitar tracks, but you only have to use the plugin one time, which is 4 times less than if you were to copy and paste it to every track, which saves your computer some power. And just like effects, everything you do to the bus track will apply to all of the tracks being sent there. So you can manipulate the volume. You can pan them all as a group. You can even take this bus track and you can create a track in here in which you can go into your automation and you can change the volume as a group of tracks. So as you can see already, this technique is extremely useful for grouping things together, and you can throw any effect you want on here. We can throw some chroma verb on. Boom, now we got reverb on all our guitars. The only time I usually don't use a bus for effects is with compression, because it's okay to EQ a group of tracks because you're EQing the sum of all the tracks together, and in EQ, it usually works fine. Whereas with compression works because it's taking the signal from your audio track and compressing that. So you usually want to do those individually, because if you send them all together, it's compressing the sum of all 4 or however many tracks you have together, and it just doesn't really work exactly correctly. It does work sometimes, though. It just depends on the scenario, kind of like everything. Okay, let's move on to sends now. So much like a bus, a send is going to take audio signal and it's going to send it to an auxiliary track. But instead of making the entire output of a track get sent, you can choose how much signal is sent to where. It's confusing, so we're going to go back to the computer and look at it. Okay, so we still have these 4 acoustic guitar tracks being bused to bus 6 here, but let's try to use an effect send to get some reverb on these. Okay, so just like we did the first time, I'm going to highlight all 4 of my guitar tracks, and right above output, it says sends. Choose another empty bus. We can go bus 7 this time. So now what happens is, let's say I highlight all of these and I play it back. The higher I turn this knob up, the more volume you'll see in this new aux track it built for us. Okay, so by itself it seems a little weird. Why would you do that? But let's go ahead and name this verb. Now what we can do is we can throw a reverb like chroma verb on the aux track. We can choose any random preset, it doesn't matter. We'll go with emotional piano space, and then watch what happens. Now these sends that are called bus 7, these are going to control how much of your guitar goes into this reverb. And for that reason, we're going to keep our dry on the reverb, we're going to keep our dry signal 0, and we're going to keep our wet 100%. Usually if you're using a reverb directly on a track, you would never make it 100% because then you wouldn't be able to hear any of your sound source. It would just be a whole lot of reverb and it would be very confusing. But in this case, the send is acting as that dry-wet balance. The more you send, the wetter it'll be, and the more you pull back, the drier it'll be. So I'm going to start upping the gain from all of our sends, and you'll see chroma start to wake up a little. If you want to use the same effect for multiple tracks, this saves you from having to copy and paste the effect on all the other tracks, just like we were talking about before, but this time you can dial up however much you want to send to the same style of effect. So instead of copying, pasting to multiple different tracks and changing the dry and wet gain, you can just send them to the same effect, and then you can toggle the gain in the send instead. And just to show how this is working, if you solo out the auxiliary track getting sent the signal that has the reverb on it, in this case it's called bus 7, you can just hear the signal being sent from your tracks through the reverb. That's what it's doing behind your dry tracks. Okay, so now you might be wondering, why would we send signal to a reverb track, a reverb aux track, instead of just dragging this chroma right onto our bus track that we created for acoustic guitars? And that's a good question. You can do that, but what if you want to use that reverb space with other tracks in your mix? Then you're going to still get into that annoying thing where you have to copy the exact preset and drag it onto your drums or whatnot, and then say, oh, it's too wet, let's turn down the wet and turn up the dry. So if you just want to use an effect one time, you can pop it right on the bus. I use effect sends and buses all the time because I never know if I'm going to want to put a different instrument into that same, usually reverb or delay. Okay, so let's move on and use these two things in conjunction, because I think that'll kind of clear it up a lot, because this is usually how it goes in your mix for real. Okay, so I stopped sending all 4 of these tracks to bus 7. I took all those off because instead what we're going to do, and you're probably thinking, why didn't you do this from the beginning? And it's just because I wanted to explain the difference between the two of them before I combine the techniques. And that is, I'm going to go to our bus track that contains our acoustic guitar, right? Bus 6, everything's being sent there. And I'm going to use the send function. I'm going to use the send function on the bus track and send that to our reverb on bus 7 right here. I'll put this in the corner. So now we're taking the group of tracks that are being sent to bus 6, and we're sending those to bus 7, which contain our reverb, and we can use the gain dial to make it as reverby or dry as you want. Okay, I'm going to open up one of my other sessions. This was kind of just a demo session, just to give you a quick recap and show you what one of my mixes really looks like with all these techniques kind of put into place. Okay, so let's wrap this video up by looking at my session for my band Cute Threat, our new song called I Know How to Breathe. Lots of buses and sends everywhere. These are all aux tracks, aux track, aux track. Here we have the acoustic guitars. All 4 of the acoustic guitar tracks are being sent to bus 4, which is this aux track called acoustic. Bus 4, now this is being sent, all of this is being sent to bus 3, which is over here, and it's actually being paired with the drums in a reverb track. You can see the drum bus is being sent to bus 3 also. So if you listen to just this reverb track called drum verb, you can hear a little bit of acoustic guitar and a lot of drums. That's why we always use the buses and sends for everything, because I grouped all the drums together, put them in an aux track, and then I sent the signal from that aux track containing all of the drums to this reverb. And then later on in the recording process, I said, okay, I have this acoustic guitar. What kind of reverb does it need? Oh, I kind of like the sound of the reverb on the drums, so let me just also send it there. The most clear-cut example of how I use this all the time is my amp room. So whenever I have electric guitar, electric bass, I send all that signal to an amp room preset in ChromaVerb. It basically makes it sound like it's being recorded in a little room. Even though my guitar was recorded in this little room, it just gives it a little life and a little extra brightness. I'll probably talk about that in more detail in another video. So what I always do is I group the electric guitars together. I send them to, in this case, bus 2, right? And I group these together by sending them all to bus 1, which is this track right here. And then I send bus 1 to bus 2, which is my amp room over here. See, the input right here is bus 2, and then it's being fed through ChromaVerb, wet 100%. And then I also want the bass to be in the same room. So I send the bass track, this is just one track, and I send that to bus 2 also. This is being sent at -15, and the electric guitars are being sent at -14. So a minor difference, but still, okay, I want them to be in the same room, but I want the electric guitars to have a little bit less of that sound. And then if we go all the way over here, and solo out that amp room aux track, you can hear the bass and the guitar together coming through. So if we just take a quick look at the electric guitars, you can see how much processing power we're saving by using these techniques, right? So all 4 of these guitars are being bussed to this aux track, and they're getting 1 EQ. So that's saving, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 instances of the EQ, we're only using 1 of them. And then this entire group is being sent to bus 2, which is the amp room all the way over there. That's saving us from creating the amp room reverb sound and dropping it also 1, 2, 3, 4 times on all of our tracks. So right there, we went from using 4 EQs and 4 reverb plugins to just using 1 of each. And your computer will thank you for doing that, because it's not doing any heavy breathing trying to run that. So real quick, if we just take a look at my entire mix view here, it seems like there aren't that many plugins being used, but a lot of that is because there are a lot of tracks, and a lot of them are being sent to this amp room, this drum reverb, the Vox reverb, vocal delay, the huge reverb. So instead of having just a million EQs and a million reverbs and delays all over my mix, it's all kind of right here and organized in these bus tracks. So I highly recommend using these techniques, implementing them to your workflow, because it'll save your computer a lot of processing. It'll make your mix a lot more organized and easy to work through. Also, on the topic of organization, please name your tracks. I have so many students who don't name their tracks, and I never know what anything is. It says like piano 3 and it's drums, and I'm like, dude, you gotta name them, because how would you even know what you're working with? So it'll organize your sessions. It'll keep that computer fan from running while you're trying to record vocals, because it's in the background trying to process all your effects. This will make that a lot easier on your CPU. And if you want all this information in blog post form, it's all written out on my website. There are screenshots and everything. So if you want to come back and say, okay, well, how did this work? And you want to read it instead of watching this video again and combing through, that'll be in the description. You can check out my band Cute Threat. We just released a new song, this one that I was working with before. That link's going to be in the description too. And if you want to take one-on-one music production, recording, songwriting lessons, anything like that, you can send me an email. My website is linked below as well. And I'll see you next time with some more knowledge. Bye.